My name is Grant McAllister. I'm 45 years old, and until recently, I was the director of IT infrastructure at Everstead Components, a mid-sized industrial firm just outside Cincinnati, Ohio. If you've ever worked in a company that hums along quietly day to day, you know there's always someone in the background keeping the gears turning. That was me for a little over a decade. I never needed a spotlight. I liked knowing the systems ran because of work I'd done. Most people didn't know my name, but they sure noticed when something went wrong and just as quickly forgot when I fixed it. That was fine. I wasn't there for applause. When I first came to Cincinnati, I wasn't planning to stay long. My then wife, Kayla, had family in town, and we figured a few years close to home might help us settle down. She had dreams of teaching art at the university. I just wanted to start fresh. My resume wasn't spectacular, and we didn't have much. I took contract jobs here and there. Then a data center at Everstead melted down figuratively, but just barely, and I walked in on a 6-month contract. Turned out they didn't need a contractor. They needed a complete overhaul. Wiring was outdated, firewalls practically non-existent, backup systems hadn't been tested in years. The place was a house of cards, and everyone knew it. But they gave me a desk, a key card, and said, "Do what you can." That's how it started. I was on a mission to stay, but I kept showing up. I rebuilt the network with used equipment and borrowed time. Wrote policy from scratch. Trained young analysts who barely knew what an IP conflict was. Most of them stuck around. We grew together. One of those kids, Lucy, eventually became my lead systems engineer. Smart, reliable, good instincts. Reminded me a lot of myself in the early years, only sharper. When a regional blackout took down half the grid in 2018, we were the only plant in the area that didn't lose a minute of uptime. My team's monitoring system caught the flicker before it became a fault. That's when leadership really noticed. I started getting invited to meetings. Budget requests didn't get questioned anymore. At the time, I thought I'd finally crossed over from utility to asset. But in business, the ground can shift quietly. A missing calendar invite here. A project handed off there. That's how it starts. I didn't see the writing on the walnut right away, but I felt the draft. I told myself I was overthinking, that I was just tired. After all, I'd been holding the line for years. Then came the lunch with Marlene. She picked the place Darnell's. If you're from around here, you know it's where deals are made and news is delivered. You don't get invited there for routine feedback. Sitting across from her, with a glass of unsweetened tea and a half-eaten steak, I heard the words I knew were coming. We're heading in a different direction with tech leadership. I nodded once and folded my napkin. I didn't protest. Not because I agreed, but because I was ready. In the days after that lunch at Darnell's, I didn't say much to anyone. I came into work on time, answered questions when asked, and kept my calendar mostly clear. From the outside, I probably looked resigned, like a man easing into a long overdue retirement. But inside, I was working. You see, the thing about staying invisible for years is that people stop watching you. They think they've seen all you have to offer. They assume you've got no cards left to play. But what they forget, what David and Marlene forgoed, is that people like me, the quiet ones, we keep records. 3 weeks before the lunch, I'd noticed some odd behavior in the server logs. Nothing dramatic, just small anomalies. Access requests pinging from unusual locations inside our firewall. Credentials with administrator permissions accessing archives that hadn't been touched in years. I traced it back to a user profile with no name attached, just an employee number that hadn't yet been publicly introduced. David. He wasn't even officially on board yet, but someone in HR had already set him up with full access. And he'd been using it, studying the architecture I built, reading through my personal logs, my notes, the frameworks I had developed over the years. I recognized the pattern. He was preparing a handover before I'd even been told there would be one. I wasn't angry exactly. Not yet. But I started documenting. I pulled logs. I backed up key systems to a private secure volume. I reviewed the original licensing records of tools I had written before my time at Everstead Scripts and Modules I'd later folded into our enterprise systems. Most people in leadership had long since forgotten the details of my original employment offer, but I hadn't. My personal work, anything I'd built prior, was mine. unless explicitly acquired. They hadn't done that. That Friday, I reached out to Lucy. We met at a small cafe near the edge of the business district. It was quiet there, away from the buzz of office chatter. She showed up 10 minutes early, typical Lucy. Always prepared. "I think we're being outmaneuvered," I told her. She sipped her coffee and nodded. "David's been poking around, asking the team questions that don't make sense. Like how long the monitoring system can run without a reboot, or how the failover clusters handle signature validation. He's got access to everything, Grant. Do they know what they're looking at?" I asked. "No," she said, "and that's what makes it worse." I told her about the licensing clause, about the logs. I asked her who else on the team saw what was happening. A few of them. Quietly. Nobody wants to speak up. Everyone's worried they're next. Back at my home office that night, I unlocked an old safe I hadn't touched in years. Inside were 2 hard drives, one labeled Archive DV, the other marked SY&C drafts. I plugged them in, one at a time, and confirmed what I already suspected: the original code for the systems that now ran Eversted's manufacturing operations had been written long before I joined the company. Time-stamped, digitally signed, and stored under my name. I'd even used pieces of those tools when doing freelance work back in Columbus. One folder, in particular, caught my eye: SigVerify. It was an old failsafe. I had Retina quiet process that checked for code integrity every 30 days and issued a license prompt if unauthorized changes were detected. It had never been activated, but the code was clean, functional. I made some updates. The following Monday, I went to work as usual, smiled in meetings, took notes in briefings led by David, who was still trying to talk like he'd built the place himself. I let him. I didn't correct him. I didn't warn anyone, because the people who needed warning had already chosen not to listen. That night, I quietly deployed SigVerify into the Master S. From me. I didn't tell Lucy. Didn't involve anyone else. That wouldn't have. In the meantime, I started making calls. Not angry ones. Just exploratory. I reached out to a few people I'd worked with years ago, clients, vendors, even a former competitor in Chicago who'd once tried to poach me. One of them remembered me right away. "We've got a logistics firm outside Louisville looking to modernize their entire backbone," he said. "They need someone who knows what real uptime looks like. Send me the specs," I said. That night, I slept well. It wasn't over yet, but the groundwork was set. They thought they could rewrite the script. What they didn't realize was I still had the pen. By Thursday of that week, the announcements started trickling out. Internal memos. A video message from Marlene thanking me for over a decade of dedicated service and highlighting a new chapter for Eversted's IT vision. David, of course, was named as the incoming chief of digital innovation. He stood beside her in the video, nodding like he already owned the place. Most of the team watched it with tight jaws and stiff shoulders. Lucy messaged me later. "They're spinning it like you retired." I replied, "Let them." There was no farewell lunch, no plaque, no send-off from the executive team. HR had scheduled a short exit interview for the following Monday, just a half-hour block with someone I'd never met before. I didn't mind. Ceremony wasn't something I ever needed. The people who knew what mattered had already spoken. Quiet acknowledgments from floor engineers, a few heartfelt emails from junior staffers I'd mentored. Those were the ones that stuck. I spent the weekend going through old files, consolidating everything I needed and deleting what didn't belong to me. Not out of spite, but out of discipline. Clean endings matter. That Sunday, I received a call from Everett Sinclair, the CEO of the regional logistics firm I'd been in contact with. He didn't mince words. "We need someone like you, Grant. Someone who understands stability. Someone who builds for 10 years, not 10 months. I don't need titles," I said. "I just want room to work and a team I can trust." "You'll have both," he said. "We'll start you as consultant. If it fits, we can talk longer term." I accepted, quietly. No LinkedIn update. No fanfare. Just a man moving forward on his own terms. Monday morning came fast. My official last day. I showed up early, not out of obligation, but out of habit. A few folks from facilities waved as I came in. Lucy met me by the coffee machine, handed me a paper cup, and said nothing. She didn't have to. At 10:30, I sat across from the HR rep. Young woman, polished but tired looking, reading from a checklist like she was filling in blanks on a government form. Any comments about your time at Everstead? No, I said. Any concerns you'd like to share? Not with you, I replied calmly. She blinked, then typed something into the system. All right, that concludes our session. Thank you, Mr. McAllister. I handed her my badge. Have a good day. As I walked out of that building for the last time, I felt nothing sharp. No bitterness. No resentment. Only clarity. I had done what I came to do, and they had done what they felt they needed to do. But the story wasn't finished, not quite. At 8 a.m. the next morning, right on schedule, SigVerify triggered. Every instance of my system touched by the verification script began doing what it was designed to do: issue a prompt for license renewal. Just a polite message on the console screen. System running on expired license. Please contact original developer for continued use. No crashes. No breakdowns. Just a quiet reminder that you can't take what doesn't belong to you and expect it to run forever. At 8:17, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then came the text from Lucy. They're scrambling. David's in full panic mode. They don't know what it is. I sipped my coffee and stared out the window of my den. It was still early, the sun not yet high enough to break through the cloud layer. It was going to be a gray day in Cincinnati, just the kind I liked. By 9:03, Marlene had emailed. Short and clipped. Grant, we're experiencing a licensing issue across several systems. We need your assistance immediately. Please advise. I waited 5 minutes before replying. Happy to assist. I prepared a license renewal agreement. Please forward it to your legal team. By noon, I was on a call with 2 attorneys from Everstead and 1 from my side. I explained the origin of the code, the development history, and the clause in my employment agreement. I wasn't threatening litigation. I was offering terms. This isn't about shutting you down, I said. It's about recognition. You're using proprietary work. I'm willing to license it fairly. To their credit, the legal team listened. They read the documentation. They verified the timestamps. By the end of the day, the agreement was signed. I would retain ownership. Everstead would pay a modest licensing fee annually. In return, the systems would continue running without interruption. David never contacted me directly, but Lucy told me he was quiet the rest of the week. 3 days later, I got my first paycheck from the logistics firm in Louisville. It was half of what I made at Everstead, but the hours were mine, the work was mine, and the value? That too was mine. That Friday, I took a drive out to Yellow Springs. Walked the Glen with no phone. Just quiet, just stillness. Somewhere near the Ridge Trail, I paused to sit on a bench. The trees were just starting to change burnt orange and soft yellow. That moment, watching the wind roll through the branches, I realized I didn't miss my old job. I missed the work. But the job? That could stay in the past. The following month was quieter than I expected. There were no late-night calls, no production crises. Just the rhythm of early mornings in my own kitchen, the comfort of a pot of coffee brewed the old-fashioned way, and a steady stream of projects from the logistics firm I joined. It was the kind of slow, deliberate pace I hadn't felt in years. Lucy came on board 2 weeks after me. She didn't ask for much, just a fair salary, flexible hours, and the freedom to build instead of constantly defend her work. I gave her all 3. We set up shop in a small co-working space near the river-exposed brick, high windows, the kind of place with decent coffee and no dress code. It didn't look like much, but it was ours. By the end of the 3rd week, we'd landed our second client, a regional packaging company with outdated infrastructure and no clue how to modernize without breaking what still barely worked. Lucy took the lead on diagnostics, while I focused on designing a sustainable rollout. There were no board meetings, no posturing, just the work, plain and honest. Every now and then, I catch myself glancing at my phone, half expecting another message from Everstead. But they were silent. No legal threats, no licensing complaints. They paid their invoice and moved on, at least outwardly. But through back channels, I heard David was struggling. The system he'd inherited wasn't the sandbox he thought it would be. The same redundancies I'd built to protect the company were now revealing the gaps in his experience. Vanessa, one of the mid-level engineers still at Everstead, messaged me one evening. David's trying to reverse engineer your load balancing script. Keeps breaking things. People are frustrated. I replied simply, tell them to document everything. Protect themselves. Then I let it go. I wasn't going to fight ghosts. Instead, I poured my energy into something new. I started drafting a framework for a lightweight system monitoring suite, something lean enough for small businesses but sturdy enough to scale. I named it Sentinella, quiet nod to the role I had played for so many years without recognition. We tested the prototype with our third client, a mid-sized auto parts distributor in Dayton. Their systems were barely patched together duct tape, and luck holding it all up. Within 3 weeks, Sentinel had cut downtime by 22%, just through better diagnostics and proactive alerts. When I presented the results to their leadership team, one of them asked if I'd ever consider productizing the platform. I said I'd think about it. That night, over a bourbon on my back porch, I ran the numbers. The market was there. The need was there. I had the experience, the credibility, and now, finally, the freedom. Maybe Sentinel didn't just have to be a tool for clients. Maybe it could be something more. I ran the idea by Lucy the next morning. She didn't hesitate. You build it, I'll test it. But if we do this, it's ours. No shortcuts. No strategic partners until we're ready. Agreed, I said. That Friday, we took a walk by the river to talk through the architecture. I brought a notebook paper, not digital. It felt good to sketch again, to build something from scratch with no politics attached. Just function. Just purpose. A week later, we added a third person to the team, Evan, a recent college grad I'd mentored during an internship at Everstead. Sharp kid. Humble. Good instincts. He was tired of corporate ambiguity and wanted to work somewhere that meant something. I don't want a title, he said during our interview. I just want to solve real problems. You're in the right place, I told him. We rented a second desk. While Sentinel grew, so did my clarity. I realized something simple but powerful. Leaving Everstead wasn't the end of anything. It was a correction, a recentering. I'd spent years patching over gaps, covering for leadership that didn't know what it didn't know. I'd been praised when things went well and forgotten the moment budgets tightened. Now, every success we had was our own. Every system that ran smoother, every outage avoided, that was our doing, start to finish. But it wasn't just about work. I found myself walking more, reading more, reconnecting with old friends I'd sidelined during years of 60-hour weeks. I called Kayla, my ex-wife, one evening not to rekindle anything, just to thank her. Without our move to Cincinnati, without the life we tried to build, I wouldn't have ended up where I was. She was kind. Wished me well. Some wounds heal slower, but they do heal. 6 weeks after Sentinel's pilot launch, we got our first inbound inquiry. An agricultural co-op in Indiana had heard about us through a vendor and wanted to know if our system could scale across multiple distribution centers. I smiled when I read the email. We're not just a service team anymore, I told Lucy. We're building a product. She smiled back. Then let's do it right. And we did. We set deadlines. Missed a few. Hit most. Got better. I didn't miss the boardroom. I didn't miss the politics. I didn't miss the emails sent at 2 a.m., demanding fixes for problems leadership had ignored for weeks. What I missed was what I now had again: real work, real people, and a sense of quiet control. By early spring, Sentinel was no longer just a side project. It was the heart of what we were doing. We'd brought on a fourth team member, Lana, a systems engineer who had quietly left Everstead 2 months after I did. Her resignation letter was short, just 2 sentences long. It's clear the direction has changed. I'm choosing to go where work is respected again. She didn't need to say more. I'd seen the look on her face that last week when David overrode her scheduling protocol and caused a half-day outage in their Ohio warehouse. She took the blame. David took a long weekend. Now, she sat across from me in our small conference, nook, really just a round table near the kitchen, net mapping out a diagnostic layer we hadn't thought of before. Her eyes lit up when she explained the load balancing logic. Feels good to be solving real problems again, she said. It does, I nodded. And doing it on our terms. We just signed a new Cliena family-run hardware supply chain with locations across 4 states. They didn't have a dedicated IT team, just a longtime employee named Carl who kept things running and a nephew who was good with computers. Their server room was a converted storage closet, but they had a reputation for reliability. They wanted to keep it. Carl's first words to me were, "We don't need fancy. We need working." I liked him immediately. Over the next few weeks, we got Sentinel up and running at all 9 locations. Uptime improved. Inventory sync errors dropped to near zero. Carl started sleeping better. He told me over the phone one night, "My wife says I've stopped talking in my sleep about backup failures." That was the kind of feedback we valued most. Meanwhile, things at Everstead were coming apart in ways I hadn't expected, though maybe I should have. David's enthusiasm had worn thin. The confidence that got him the job wasn't helping him lead a team. Vanessa messaged me to say the morale had cratered. People were walking on eggshells. More were leaving. "He keeps saying we need to break things to innovate," she wrote. "But the only things breaking are the systems." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I wasn't going back. But I did take note. One Thursday afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Marlene, the CEO. Her voice was measured, polite, but under it, I could hear something else: fatigue, maybe even regret. "Grant, I was wondering if you'd be open to a conversation." I paused. "Depends on the conversation. We're reassessing some leadership decisions. David's been less effective than we anticipated." I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. Instead, I said, "I hope you're not looking to reverse what's already done." "No," she said quickly. "I respect your choice. But we'd like to know if you'd be open to a consulting arrangement. Short term, to help us stabilize." I thought for a long moment. "Let me call you back." I sat with it for a while. I'd built Everstead's backbone. And in some way, I still felt responsible for the people who stayed, people like Vanessa, who had covered for bad calls and kept systems afloat with duct tape and late nights. But there was something else, too. A quiet sense of power in knowing I could say yes or no on my own terms. I called her back the next morning. "I'll help, but on a limited basis," I said. "Independent contract. No re-entry. And I'll be working through Sentinel." She didn't even hesitate. Agreed. And so, I returned to Everstead through the front doors, but through a clean, professional portal build on my terms. I worked remotely, logging hours and issuing reports. I advised on a system rebuild, recommended restoring protocols David had stripped out, and outlined training modules for new hires. I never once stepped back into the building. After our contract wrapped, Marlene sent a thank you note in the mail. A real, handwritten one. "You were the adult in the room, even when we weren't," she wrote. "I'm sorry it took losing you to realize that." I placed the card in a drawer next to an old photo of Kayla and me in our early days before the detour, before the setbacks, before all the redirections life had handed out. Back at Sentinel, we had started something steady. Not flashy, not built for headlines, but solid. Word of mouth was bringing in leads. Evan had grown into a sharp project manager. Lana and Lucy had become more than engineers, they were visionaries in their own right. And me? I had a life with space in it. I had time for morning walks, time to visit my niece's soccer games, time to sit on the porch with a book and finish a cup of coffee while it was still hot. I wasn't the man who needed boardroom validation anymore. I was the man who'd learned to build with both hands and walk away without bitterness. Sometimes what feels like being discarded is really just being redirected. And if you've kept your integrity, your calm, and your preparation intact, you're never really starting over. You're just finally starting right. By the end of that summer, Sentinel had grown into more than just a small consultancy. It had become something close to a philosophy, quietly doing the right work for the right reasons. We didn't chase contracts for flash. We didn't promise things we couldn't maintain. We delivered stability in a world that had become obsessed with disruption. Our latest client was a regional medical equipment distributor. They'd been plagued by recurring outages in their scheduling system, resulting in delivery delays to hospitals and clinics, places where waiting even a few hours too long could mean real consequences. When their COO called me, she wasn't asking for innovation. She was asking for reliability. "You don't have to be the flashiest," she told me. Just tell me the shipments will get where they're supposed to go. That we could do. Lucy led the rebuild. Lana configured new diagnostics. I took a step back, more oversight than hands-on. It was the first time I'd felt confident enough to let go. I spent more time at home, at the local community center where I'd started mentoring a few tech-minded high schoolers who reminded me of my younger self, curious, unsure, full of potential. One of them, Malik, came from a family where college wasn't given. He'd never touched a server before I brought him into Sentinel's workshop one Saturday morning. "You really trust me to work on this?" he asked, hands hovering near the equipment. "I trust you to learn," I said. He smiled, nervous, proud. No one's ever said that to me before. It stuck with me. How many people in my life had waited for someone to say, "I trust you to learn"? That's what I'd missed in places like Everstead. Somewhere along the way, leadership became about performance and optics, not growth or quiet guidance. No one wanted a mentor anymore. They wanted results fast, polished, already finished. Not here. Not with Sentinel. Her subject line simply read, "Hey." We hadn't spoken in years, not beyond obligatory documents, and the rare update passed through her sister. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity, or maybe closure, made me click. "I heard from your niece that you started your own business. I'm proud of you. Cincinnati wasn't easy for either of us, but I think you found something real there. I'm remarried now's kind, grounded. I hope you found peace too." There was no bitterness in it, just something close to grace. I didn't respond right away. I sat with it, thought about our early days, what we tried to build. We were young. We gave our best. Sometimes things just don't hold. But that didn't mean they weren't worth something. A few weeks later, I did write back. I did find peace. Eventually. "I'm glad you did too." That was enough. Back at Sentinel, the pace was picking up. More businesses were reaching out, not because we advertised, but because someone they trusted had said, "Talk to Grant." That kind of reputation can't be bought. It's built in the late hours, in the quiet fixes, in the decisions you don't make for show. One afternoon, Lucy brought me a handwritten note. It came through the contact form. Oddly enough, she said, handing it over. The card inside was simple. Cream-colored, firm cardstock. The handwriting familiar. It was from Carl, the old hardware distributor's jack-of-all-trades IT guy. "Grant, our systems have never run smoother. My wife says I smile more now. That has everything to do with not being up at 2 a.m. wondering if the server crashed again. Thank you. Really." I kept the card in my desk drawer. Not for show, just for those days when doubt tried to creep in. Late that fall, TechCore finalized their full integration of Everstead. Marlene stepped down quietly. David, I'd heard through the grapevine, had taken a position at a marketing tech startup in Chicago. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt distance, like looking back at a place I used to live. That chapter was closed. Instead, I looked toward the next one. I'd signed Sentinel to a long-term contract with a group of Midwestern food co-ops who needed someone to manage their supply systems. It wasn't glamorous work, but it mattered, and we were good at it. Lana was now training a junior systems engineer we'd hired straight out of college. Evan, who had started with us as an intern, was now overseeing our day-to-day operations. He came to me one afternoon and said, "We could probably double in size by next year." I nodded. "We could." He waited. "Do you want to?" I looked out the office window just 2 floors up, overlooking a tree-lined side street. The leaves were turning gold and red. My coffee had gone cold, but I didn't mind. I'd finally gotten used to mornings that didn't feel rushed. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Let's keep doing the work right. That'll decide everything else." He smiled. "Fair enough." That night, I walked home instead of driving. Took the long way through the neighborhood. The air smelled like firewood and faint traces of rain. A kid zoomed past on a scooter, waving at someone I couldn't see. And I realized I didn't miss the boardrooms. I didn't miss the strategic briefings, the polished handshakes. What I had now was real, quiet, steady, earned. Spring in Cincinnati isn't loud. It arrives like someone setting down a glass of water gently, quietly. You look up one morning and the dogwoods have bloomed. The air smells a little less like salt from the road and more like something growing. It had been about 4 months since I'd left Everstead. Sentinel, the consultancy I'd launched with Lucy and a few others, was steady, not explosive, not some Silicon Valley headline, just honest work for clients who needed real systems built by people who listened first. We had moved into a modest brick office off Montgomery Road, just big enough for a 6-person team and strong coffee. Lucy had taken the office with the most light. She said it helped her think. I never argued. One Monday morning, I walked in to find her leaning against my doorframe, mug in hand. You're not going to believe who called this morning. I glanced up, wary. Please tell me it wasn't Preston. Nope, she grinned. Vantage Systems, mid-level division of TechCore. That got my attention. TechCore had absorbed Everstead not long after my departure, bringing in new leadership and, reportedly, a lot of confusion. They've got a system we could have written in our sleep, Lucy continued. But they broke it trying to make it cheaper. Sound about right. They want help. Quiet help. We go in as external consultants. I leaned back in my chair. Did they know they were calling us? They knew exactly who they were calling. A few days later, I met with their head of operations, a woman named Sandra Holt. Straight shooter, late 40s, wore a denim blazer and a wristwatch that probably hadn't left her arm in 10 years. We're not looking to blow up the system, she said over coffee. We just want to make it work the way it should have. And you want that done quietly. She gave me a half smile. Loud fixes attract the wrong kind of attention. I respected her already. By the following week, we were embedded Lucy, myself, and a junior tech named Mason, who was learning quickly and asking the right kinds of questions. About a month into the project, I was walking through the main floor of their operations hub when I ran into someone I hadn't seen in nearly a year. Marlene, Everstead's former CEO. She was thinner now. Her hair was cut short and colored darker. Still sharp. Still composed. Grant, she said, blinking. I didn't expect. I nodded. I didn't either. We stood there for a long moment in the hallway. Neither of us moved. You've done well, she said finally. Her voice didn't carry the weight it once did. I've been lucky, I said. And careful. She looked down. It wasn't personal, you know. What happened? I know, I said, but it was still wrong. Marlene didn't argue. She just nodded, like someone who had finally run out of excuses and was tired of searching for new ones. That evening, Lucy and I sat on the back patio of the office, eating dinner out of takeout containers. She saw you, Lucy said. Yep. How'd it feel? I thought for a moment. Like someone who used to control the temperature in the room just realized she can't change the weather anymore. Lucy laughed. That's poetic for you. Don't get used to it. The contract with Vantage extended another 2 months. They renewed without hesitation. By then, we'd cleaned up their back-end infrastructure, simplified workflows, and put in layered safeguards that could adapt as they scaled. And still, we kept things small. Intentional. I wasn't chasing headcount anymore. I was chasing clarity, good clients, a team I trusted, enough revenue to grow, not explode. Mason surprised me one morning. He brought in a proposal he'd written on his own internal diagnostic tool that simplified monitoring across server types. It wasn't flashy, but it was smart, efficient, exactly the kind of thinking I wanted to nurture. Can we build it out? He asked. I nodded. Let's run a pilot next month. He lit up. Thanks for trusting me. Earned, I said. That's how it works around here. One afternoon, Sandra invited Lucy and me to lunch. Nothing formal, just a quiet thank you. You all run a tight ship, she said between bites. Not just with code. The way you work, the way you treat people, there's respect there. That's not just a business model, Lucy said. It's who we are. Sandra nodded. Well, if you're open to it, we'd like to keep Y. Happy to help, I said. And I meant it. I didn't miss the long hours, the politics, or the boardroom egos. But I still loved the work. When it was honest. When it was earned. That night, I walked home about 1.5 miles through the older part of town, past the bakery with the chalkboard menu and the church whose bells still rang every hour. Success isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's just knowing the right people are with you. I smiled. Not because it was profound, but because it was true. It's funny what you notice when life slows down. The first thing I heard this morning wasn't an alarm or a meeting reminder. It was the sound of birds outside the window, building a nest in the maple tree out front. I sat with my coffee on the porch for a long while, watching them work one twig at a time. Patient, focused, building something that would hold. A year ago, I wouldn't have noticed. Too busy fixing other people's emergencies. Too buried in systems, deadlines, and boardroom politics. Back then, I thought staying late was loyalty. I thought being needed meant being valued. Turns out those aren't the same thing. Now I work when I choose. I answer only to the clients I respect. I have my name on the door, not because I needed to prove something, but because I earned it. Quietly. Honestly, some people asked if I ever regretted not fighting harder when Everstead pushed me out. But what would fighting have changed? That company had already decided what I was worth. I just hadn't. Walking away was the hardest and smartest thing I've ever done. Because here's what I learned. Value isn't something they give you. It's something you build, protect, and carry with you. And when the right people see it, you don't have to shout. The day I left Everstead, I told myself I wasn't chasing revenge. And I didn't. What I chased was resolution, dignity, a clean break, and a better way forward for myself and for the people who trusted me enough to follow. Now we build quietly. We build well. Sometimes, in the late afternoons, I'll look out the window of our small office and catch Lucy tinkering with a new system or Mason laughing with a client on the phone. And I feel something settle inside me. Not pride exactly. Something deeper. Something steadier. Peace. I used to think the systems were what mattered: the servers, the firewalls, the uptime reports. But it's not the code. It's the people, the trust, the quiet, daily decisions to do things the right way, even when no one's watching. That's the only system that lasts. And this time, I built it right.